Hi guys, we're about to discuss a video of a design of mine that was actually a long time coming. Sometime during August of either 2019 or 2018, I can never remember which. Let's go with 2018 because it sounds older. I discovered that I have a fursona. It just kind of came to me one day. I think I was just thinking about the animal that I resembled the most, probably initiated by when my dad asked me which animal I think I resemble the most. I'd never actually thought about it before, but then ever since I was thinking about it, like probably in my subconscious for months afterwards, until I realized, you know, maybe I'm deer-like. I'm afraid of everything, but I have an inclination towards agility and fun. So, deer it became. Then the next step, of course, was to come up with a good color scheme. So, I did that. But then I realized, you know, I got the profile pic. I've got the animal form. But some of my profiles have banners. So I'll need to make something to fit that. And that's where we get today's video. Now, as you watch the drawing process, you'll notice that I used Adobe Illustrator for the line art and other various details. The reason being is because it is still only a banner. It's not what I would consider real art. That is not to say that if you yourself use Adobe Illustrator, it doesn't mean it's real art. It's still art to you. Whatever you classify as art of your own becomes your own art. I'm talking strictly of myself. If it's a logo, if it's a brand, if it's something that just simply represents me, it is not real art. It is just a logo. It's just an illustration. I mean, yeah, it took me, 8 hours to make it, but it's just a branding logo. A few creatures hanging out in a particular biome, and that's it. The colors were added in Photoshop because I wanted more precision than Illustrator normally allows for color addition, so that's why that was done. So with that said, let's get started. So right out the gate, as usual, doing 2000% speed. Step 1, thumbnails. This is where you basically draw out all the ideas locked in your head, every single variation of your proposed final plan you can possibly think of. Quickly narrowed that down. That probably took me like 5 minutes. So we settled on a forest with the deer facing in various directions. Yeah, okay, so I'm a tracer, but I stylize it, okay? It's okay if I stylize it, right? This is building here what you might call the preliminary sketch. Got poses from my generous online friends over at, I think it was Wildlands Discord. Here I am taking the head of a deer and combining it with the body of another one because I preferred a little bit of both. And now here we are trying to combine the two into a nice, lovely design. Trying to figure out exactly where all the components go. I do roughly the same for the other two deer pictured in the final design, which of course will be linked in the description below. Also accounting for the foreshortening, the fact that things get smaller the further away they are, to the best of my ability. There's not a lot of distance between these three animals. They always travel in a pack, so they're never going to be far apart from one another. So I did the best I can with what I've got. Let's move on. Alright, now that the deer are finally right where I want them and facing the particular directions that I want them, I have labeled them with their names, I think. No, not yet. And now you can see me tracing out the rough outline of what their final shape is going to be with the pencil tool, which is a very, very lovely tool in Illustrator. Allows you to make curves without having to use the pen tool over and over again. The pen tool is difficult to master, but it's the kind of tool that once you do master it, you're just like, how did I live without this before? So most of this time will be spent tracing, I mean, realizing the general shape of my final characters and fixing up any flaws. And trust me, by the time all these pencil marks are done, there are a lot of flaws. You can tell that these shapes are not close to what looks like a believable anatomy, even if it is cartoony. The head I more or less nailed on the first try, just gotta clean up some points on it. Points being the blue dots that follow along the outline itself. The horns, of course, are of my own creation, so there's no tracing to be done there. I can only use my own reference point, which originated from, as you may have caught a glimpse of it a second ago, Doom 2016, I can't remember the year, one of those Doom games. So, to be blunt, I'm gonna stop here for a sec. To be blunt, a lot, in fact, the entirety of my creations as a conglomeration of a multitude of ideas. The color scheme came from one video game. The shape of the animal came from several different artists combined into one. The horns are a derivative work. Derivation? I'm not sure what a derivative work actually is, but it's definitely a stylized version of the horns of the Lost Soul in a certain Doom game that came out before the current one. That is to say, Doom Eternal at this time. The one before that one. I remember seeing those horns on a used video game section in GameStop, and I'm like, I've got to have those. Those are my horns. They spoke to me so loudly I could not get them out of my head once I saw them. So I took a picture of the game cover, quickly looked it up, and now I just use that shape. The forest is a forest. We live around forests, so that's obvious. Obvious reference is obvious. Yeah, you can call them MLP characters if you really want to. MLP meaning My Little Pony. But that's just the legs. That is strictly the legs and nothing else. Which I guess are pretty iconic. Head came from Shine Pot art. Body came from a commission for somebody else. The tail, I guess it came from the reference of a real deer. So there's that. That's all I can think of at the moment. So, yeah, I'm not very good at being original, but I am pretty good at combining ideas. So, with that said, let's move on. I'm going to keep recording until I press the play button again. So here we are. Oh, I should actually, hold on. I'm going to retake this in just a second. Alright, so here we are. We're still outlining the deer with our pencil tool. So, not much else to discuss here, just trying out stupid things. That's not a phallus. What are you talking about? What? Okay, moving on. Alright, now that I've got the outlines of the characters figured out, I will correct the flaws later. Right now I'm still working on the preliminaries, and now we're working on grass. Because what's a forest if it doesn't have grass? Using Illustrator's fancy pants scatter brush, I tried to put a frick ton of grass in the field of view. Oh god, there's so many. And it's dead grass. It's summertime, you know, because it doesn't rain in the summertime. And then after a while I realized this was really slowing down saving times. And if the save time takes too long, Illustrator will actually crash. So after trying to figure out the best way to do this, I did eventually scrap it instead to put it in Adobe Photoshop to manually... You know what, we'll get to that part when we get there. Here we are correcting the points that I mentioned before. We are now making the lines look like actual believable lines. Connecting dots where they need to be connected instead of broken ones. Curving them where they need to be curved. Adding those special little flesh folds where body parts overlap. All that fun stuff. Let's see, my favorite correction... I guess it all just kind of sucked because I'm doing 3 different characters in one piece of art. It's a lot of work. This is where the pen tool is being used the heaviest because I'm correcting curves and point locations and all kinds of very, very specific attributes of the characters. And it's a lot of refining and tweaking this tiniest, because I'm kind of a perfectionist personally. So there's a lot of refining and tweaking here that's being done that you probably wouldn't even notice if I hadn't done it. Like, it's one of those things where I know it's wrong, but you probably wouldn't know if it's wrong. You just notice, it might feel a little off, but you might not really know. But yeah, the lines are getting straighter, they're getting more believable, they're actually looking like animal curves rather than a 2-year-old's drawing. And this technique will be applied to the other 2 deer in the picture just as swiftly, because I'm a perfectionist here. I am struggling with the frickin' forehead. Oh my god, what even is a forehead, right? Trying to make the ears more believable, more elf-like. And then eventually, of course, it all comes together. Overlaps are okay, as long as you know the tech trick around those. Oh god, the point. I think I did end up shortening that down, though. I mean, who wants a dagger for an antler, right? I just love watching these processes, though. Illustrator is easily one of my favorite Adobe products because you can do crap like this, okay? You got your warp tool in Photoshop, but I don't think it's quite as specific as the pen tool in Illustrator. And I'm sure both are equally difficult to master and all that fun stuff. But it's starting to feel a little repetitive, so let's move on. So, here we have one of my own personal worst nightmares. As a novice artist, because I do rely on tracing so much, I often find myself caught up in bad anatomy. Ooh. So I'm still correcting lines here, but I decided to pick it up here because while I'm fixing up what I know I'm capable of fixing, it's the hind legs on poor, what's her name again? Claire? Claire. This is Claire, the green one. Her hind legs are a disaster. I think even somebody who doesn't know that much about deer anatomy can see that. So that leg got fixed pretty swift. I'm like, okay, I'll just make it straight, whatever. The angle that it's coming in at is oh gosh, I just gave up, didn't I? I am just working on Nova now. Okay, well, I'll get back to that leg in a minute. Just gonna skip this part here. Okay, so before we get into the next segment of speed painting, which I recently found out isn't what I thought it was, I am just speeding up my painting, but not actually doing anything. Never mind. Look, the point is, I'm about to make a time jump here. I don't record the next several minutes because I spent that time taking advice from a fellow Discord user. He tried to help me make a decent hind leg that had believable anatomy. And so, rather than discussing the actual sped up footage, I'll be discussing a few screen caps. In this first, I guess you'd call them slides, perhaps, I submit my very sad hind leg. It would be so if the deer was you, it'd be your left hind leg. So I submit this to him and I'm just like, please help, it looks like it's dying. And he responds with this nice red line. At first as you can see on the, no, I'm gonna crop that out so that we can only focus on the important details. The actual red line I'll be sharing with you is viewable now. He gives it a nice little knee and high heel. Well, that's a type of shoe. You know, it's a digitigrade, an animal that walks on its toes. Anyway, the heel is high off the ground. I'm like, okay, that looks pretty nice. Let's see what we can do with that. So I try it, and it looks like it looks like a really crappy balloon animal leg. I don't even know what happened. This is the closest I could get to his red line. It's like, well, this isn't working. Can you think of something else for me, bro? So he sends me this red line instead. So I'm like, okay, we'll go with that one. So I give it a go. I bend the what they call that part, the knuckle? Because the ankle's high off the ground. So I guess that's the knuckle that I'm bending at the bottom there. And it's getting closer. It's getting closer. So I give it another go. Maybe taking the knuckle out this time. And it's getting closer, but it still doesn't feel quite right. And then I finally settle on something that I feel is believable and feels right. And this is the final design here. Ultimately, I don't even end up sticking with it. I end up going with... I basically end up scrapping the whole leg and starting it from ground zero and leaning more heavily on the actual deer's reference design that I used on the actual image of the thumbnail more than my own imagination, because it turns out that the one I had borrowed from that sketch sheet from the beginning of this video was better at its design than I could have ever hoped to be. So, with that said, the time jump has been covered, and now you can see myself, you can see me now actually making a believable hind left leg. Let's move on. So there's the leg I mentioned. Now I'm taking it away, but I'm not deleting it. But I am following the bone structure of the actual design I am borrowing from. And it, you know, I immediately fall in love with it naturally, because as you can see, I'm already honing in those curved hooves. So yeah, I think I overthought that just a touch too much, and so now we're back to just general refining, making things look like actual things instead of scribble scrabbles. Moving on. So front-facing prey animal eyes. That was another anatomy nightmare. So hard to make it believable that I eventually ended up scrapping it completely in Illustrator and saying, you know, I'll just add the eyes in Photoshop. It's fine. It's fine. It's fine. So we're back. Now we're just working on the trees. Yeah, trees are much more necessary than the ability to see, right? We need trees everywhere. I just do mostly the foregroundish area looking trees, not every single tree, because I don't want to go crazy. And then I also realized that it's sorely lacking branches, but that'll come later, as you'll find out. And now comes the time when I flip back and forth between Photoshop and Illustrator as I realize the components of my line art that are actually missing. Starting off, of course, with general coloring. It's like, hey, gotta get those color palettes in there. So you've seen many of my speed colorings before, if you watch anything I make. So you know exactly how this one ends. I paint the outline, paint bucket the center, and then paint the outline again. It's the most efficient method I've discovered so far on a personal level, because I don't really feel like painting every square inch by hand. Tried that already in my very, very first speed paint, which I will link in the description below if you want to watch that again. So instead, the technique I use is now just paint buckets, because cartoons are easier than realism. Yay, realism. I mean, sorry, yay cartoons, because they're easier. And that's what we do now. I don't want to do fur. I just want to do color blocks. That's fine. Color blocks are right where it's at. Right where the party's at. So, speed coloring. Pretty straightforward. There's some spots for the fawn bit of me. So, let's move on. I'm also going to add here, until we move on to the next segment, that another new technique that I'm trying out here is using a different layer for every single color. Once I get closer to the end, I realize that this is no longer feasible and have to break it down by anatomy points. But that's more of an end game kind of thing. The reason I break it down by color, or newly trying to, is to make it easier to edit. Like if I paint out of the lines and I'm like, I gotta erase that, but I put all my colors on one layer. Ah, shoot. I can't erase that as easily. So some things you really do have to learn the hard way. It sucks, but you know what? Every time I make art, I'm a little bit better each time, and that's a good thing, obviously. All right, next segment. Okay, finally, all the block coloring is done. Now we're just working on giving it at least a little touch of realism here and there. And here is where I don't really care too much about accuracy because it's a forest, not a sheet of grid squares. So I want to make sure that it looks organic and believable. I use the exact same technique to make the trees themselves. The trunks of the trees, I don't straighten out anything, I don't correct any curves, I just go. I am essentially taking advantage of natural hand tremors. In this section, you can see I am using the scatterbrush tool that I just, at this exact moment, find out that Photoshop has to make the grass. I used the default settings that the grass scatterbrush had with complete disregard to the colors and the scattering, and just went nuts because I'm like, you know what, the grass is fine right where it is. It's just got to be crazy grass, and so it's crazy grass. It's just crazy grass. It's got reds and greens and yellows and all kinds of stuff. I'm like, you know what, it's fine. It's fine. It's fine right where it is. Now that we've got that done, the next element is adding believable attributes that I could not otherwise have added in Adobe Illustrator, because Adobe Illustrator is more for, you know, fine line work rather than organic line work. So you can do stuff that using the pressure sensitivity tool in Photoshop that you couldn't normally do with Illustrator. I'm still feeling bad about those nostrils on poor Red over there, but you know, whatever. I might update this in the future, not uploading a speed paint for the updates because that would be kind of excessive. And it's almost complete. Now we just need to give them the ability to see. After a minute or two, I realized these eyes would be much better built in Adobe Illustrator. And it's not bad, it's just, it's not Illustrator. So we'll move on and get to that. Alright, back to Illustrator where I can make some nice, lovely, clean lines for our eyes now that actually match the art style I'm going for in this particular work of art. Gotta make it smaller for Greenie over there, because, you know, she's further back in the distance and all that jazz. Red is facing forward. Red was a piece of work. I ended up needing to wait on a critique from a more professional artist than I before I could actually do something with Red's eyes. So for now, we are just working on Yellow's and Green's eyes until they look nice, and then using them, and then uploading the resulting line art to Photoshop to implement it, line them up and all that good stuff, and color them in, as we did with everything else. Moving on. And now Red. Forward facing. It's a prey animal, so the eyes are on the sides of the head, which makes the forward facing view one of the hardest things I think I've ever done during this project to date. Well, just during this project. So I'm just like, okay, you know what, let's try to put them in Photoshop since I have a little more control over the line shape than I do in Illustrator. No pressure here. Oops, let me do a transition proper. So, right when I thought I had finished him, they're all girls. They're all girls. I don't know why I called her to him. Anyway, that's when I submitted the critique to have this whole thing analyzed by somebody more professional, more experienced than I. Her name is Beckykidus, which I will link in the description below so that you can see her art and her critiquing skills. Don't mind the keyboard noises, I'm just taking notes about my own voices, my own voiceovers. And so you can see her work, her critiquing skills, the group she admins that involves critiquing skills, which is where I got my information. You'll see text flash on the screen, which is something she wrote herself about my work. It's like, where you could improve. Okay, let's do X, Y, and Z. I did X, Y, and Z the best I could. And so here we can watch the resulting attempt at following her instructions. Okay, so for reals this time. This is how we edit the eyes of red. First, we move the line art further away from each other because it's a prey animal, right? Yeah, really pull those suckers out of there. Now it looks like a something. Grass is made a brighter green because I was sick of looking at brown grass. And let's see, what am I doing here? So I think I was going to attempt to draw the branches of the tree per her suggestion, but I decided that, you know, it's a dead forest. Oh, updating the muzzle was also one of the things she mentioned because the white part was too wide. So I think it does look better now. Slapped on a few branches. There they are. For, you know, something in the top part. Updated the sky color, and that's it. That's the end. If you have stuck with me this far, I do thank you for your patience, and whatever length this video ends up being, probably something like half an hour. I have no clue what's going on anymore. This whole thing took 8 hours of my time collectively, and 3 weeks of my time as I worked on it whenever I could. And the only reason it even took that long, well, I should say that short, is actually because I had another art project that actually had a deadline that has passed. It was May 31st. It's already been turned in. It's on time. Actually, it was 2 days early, so it's all good. So that's it. That's my YouTube banner, my Twitter banner, my DeviantArt banner, and wherever else I have a profile that banners can be displayed. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I also hope that you keep drawing your drawings and scribbling those scribbles. See y'all next time.